Everyone called it a masterclass, the negotiation of the decade. Super agent Kia Joorabchian, the story goes, backed Newcastle into a corner and saved Arsenal £25 million on Bruno Guimarães. 25 million quid. That's the version you got fed all week on every channel in every headline. And it's a lie. Because while his £100 million release clause expired 2 years ago, Newcastle still used that figure as their asking price. That's the whole trick. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. On August 5th, 2026, Arsenal agreed a flat £75 million for Newcastle's captain. No add-ons, no bonuses, one clean number on the page. And the press wrapped it in a bow like somebody had just pulled off a robbery. But you can't get a bargain on a price that doesn't exist, can you? Rewind. Guimarães landed at Newcastle from Lyon in January 2022. 35 million up front, climbing to 43.5. He played for them and grew into the face of the club. 195 appearances, 31 goals, 32 assists, the armband on his sleeve. Somewhere in that contract sat a 9-figure release clause, and it was real for a while. Then late June 2024 rolled around and that clause expired. Quietly. No press conference, no countdown, just gone. So when Arsenal circled in the summer of 2026, that 100 million number was a corpse. A dead figure floating in old, unupdated articles. Yet reporters kept swinging it like a hammer, as if it still had weight or meant anything at all. That is exactly where the fairy tale started. Follow the math they sold you. Newcastle supposedly wanted 100 million. Arsenal paid 75. Subtract one from the other and, look at that, 25 million saved. Genius agent. Standing ovation. Except the 9-figure valuation was never a valuation. It was a clause. A dead one. Newcastle couldn't have charged that fee in 2026, even if they begged for it. So what exactly did Joorabchian negotiate down from? A buried figure. That's not a saving. That's a magic trick performed on people who weren't paying attention. It worked beautifully because a big round number sounds like a victory, and 25 million saved makes a better headline than two sides agreed a fair price for a good player. Sit with how lazy that is. A whole narrative, celebrated across the sport, built on subtracting a real number from a number that had been dead for 2 years. You were handed a discount that mathematically cannot exist, and you were told to applaud the man who invented it. So how does a story this flimsy get repeated by everyone holding a microphone? Subscribe to the channel, because once you learn to spot a manufactured narrative like this one, you'll start catching them everywhere in football. Newcastle didn't need to sell him, not even slightly. Look at how the timeline of events actually unfolded. On May 29th, 2026, they shipped winger Anthony Gordon off to Barcelona for 80 million euros. Then July 6th arrives, and Sandro Tonali walks to Tottenham for a club record £92.5 million up front. Do that arithmetic. Nearly 170 million banked from 2 players in one single summer. Their books were in great shape, flush with cash. There was no financial gun pressed to their heads, no crisis forcing a fire sale. And still, they waved goodbye to their captain, straight into the arms of a direct Premier League rival. Not a team in Spain, not somewhere they'd never see again. Arsenal. A team they line up against twice every season, forced to watch the man who wore their armband, now chasing them down in someone else's shirt. Who signs off on that when the cash is already sitting in the account? That's not business. That's something else entirely. Now the part the internet swallowed whole. On August 1st and 2nd, 2026, reports from ESPN Brazil and The Times screamed that it was a completed agreement. £80 million, they said. 70 guaranteed, 10 in add-ons. Medical booked for Monday, August 3rd. Fans threw a party. Timelines detonated. Signed, sealed, finished. Then August 3rd lands and Fabrizio Romano rips the whole thing apart. No arrangement finalized. No terms locked. The payment structure hadn't even been sorted out. That package never existed the way it was printed. The fee that actually got agreed was flat, 75, 0 add-ons, and Newcastle insisted on a clean, flat fee structure. Turned it down cold. So half the country celebrated a transfer that was nowhere close to finished on the day they cheered. How many people still think that massive figure was real? Most. The correction never travels as fast as the lie. If watching a fake headline get taken apart piece by piece is hitting the spot, drop a like. It honestly helps push this to more people who got fed the exact same nonsense. And why was that agreement nowhere close to finished? Because Newcastle's board were livid. Not over the fee, over the leak. When ESPN Brazil's Bruno Andrade splashed the agreement across the weekend of August 1st and 2nd, the boardroom didn't let it slide. They took it as an insult. So what did they do? They dragged their feet on purpose, stalled the paperwork for days, delayed the whole announcement out of pure spite for being scooped by a journalist. Think about that. A £75 million transfer involving their captain held hostage because a journalist talked early. That's not strategy. That's a bruised ego running a football organization's transfer desk. And every supporter refreshing their phone, waiting for white smoke, had no clue the holdup had nothing to do with the player and everything to do with a grudge nobody was admitting to. Then there's how Arsenal handled their end. Bizarre barely covers it. According to reports, sporting director Andrea Berta spent weeks refusing to phone Newcastle directly. No side-to-side contact. None. Instead, they funneled everything through third-party agents. Middlemen. Newcastle's officials were left baffled, genuinely stumped as to why a rival team wouldn't just call them like adults. Why the cloak and dagger? Why push an 8-figure arrangement through intermediaries when both sides have perfectly good phones sitting right there? Nobody has ever properly explained it. But it tells you everything about how this entire saga was run. Through whispers. Through leaks. Through go-betweens passing messages back and forth. Not a clean, honest agreement. Just a tangle of agents, egos, and offended executives, with one player stuck in the middle trying to get his move over the line. And this isn't even the first myth stitched around Guimarães and Arsenal. You'll hear people insist he snubbed them, that he chose someone else. Wrong. Look at January 2020. Arsenal's sporting director Edu Gaspar genuinely held talks with his camp. But Arsenal blinked. They delayed bidding until the summer over money worries, and Lyon pounced while they hesitated. Why did he pick Lyon? Because their director, Juninho Pernambucano, a storied Brazilian free-kick taker, personally rang Bruno's family and promised him a loyal, direct path to the top. A real human phone call, up against corporate cold feet. Then January 2022 comes around, Newcastle swoop in from Lyon, and Arsenal skipped filing a formal bid entirely. Not because he said no to them. Because they were buried under Nicolas Pepe's £72 million fee and Mesut Ozil's heavy wages. He never rejected Arsenal. Arsenal simply couldn't afford to ask the question. So picture the wreckage he's actually leaving behind. On July 31st, 2026, manager Eddie Howe steps down after nearly 5 years in charge. The man who built that squad from the ground up, gone. A handful of days later, on August 5th, Newcastle hand the job to a 38-year-old German coach, Matthias Geisel, dropped cold into a pre-season camp down in southern Spain. New boss, barely through the door, still learning surnames. 2 marquee players already sold and gone. And on that very same August 5th, Guimarães is granted permission to walk out of that camp and fly to London for his medical. Read the room. The captain packing his bags while the new manager hasn't even unpacked his. A project that looked unbreakable 18 months earlier, splitting apart in real time. And the 28-year-old at the center of it all, the one turning 29 this November, took one long look around and decided he'd seen more than enough. So strip the spin off the whole thing. There was no £25 million masterclass because the price they measured it against had been dead for 2 years. There was no $80 million agreement, as club officials directly refuted those claims on August 3rd. There was no ancient rejection, as Arsenal simply opted against submitting a formal bid at the time. What actually happened was messier and far more human. A furious boardroom stalling out of spite, a rival side negotiating from the shadows through middlemen, a captain choosing the exit door over a project crumbling around his ears, and a fan base sold a clean, clever fairy tale to paper over all of it. The biggest lie about this transfer was that anyone won it cleanly. Nobody did. If this pulled the curtain back even a little for you, like and subscribe, because this transfer wasn't the story football sold you.